Leif Erikson, A Journey Across the Ocean into the Realm of Dreams. Welcome. Tonight, we will not only close our eyes, but we will also go back more than 1,000 years together, leaving the noise of the modern world behind, to return to a night full of wind and the whispers of the Northern Ocean. We are about to enter an immersive journey where you are no longer a distant listener, but the person who will witness a life beginning from the pitch-black rocky ridges of Iceland and then shining like a guiding star in the Atlantic sky. You are standing at the edge of the Haukadalur Valley in the Vatnshorn region of western Iceland, just a glance away from the windy Breiðafjörður Bay. This space does not have the gentleness of the south. There is only the smell of whale fat blending with juniper wood smoke from the longhouses and the biting cold of salt spray clinging to the skin. Perhaps you would find it hard to endure if you were born into the circumstances of that boy, a child carrying the weight of exile from previous generations on his shoulders. Imagine being born into a family where glory always came with rejection, where his father, Eric the Red, with his fiery hair and explosive personality, was facing harsh sentences of banishment. In the ethereal space of Mind Manor, I invite you to immerse yourself in this saga. This is not just a dry historical story, but a Leif Erikson biography for sleep, a sedative for the soul, helping you cast off all worries to drift gradually into a deep sleep. Before we begin, if you feel these moments of stillness are truly precious, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel. Please leave a comment letting me know where you are listening from and what time your clock is showing. I read them all, not missing a single word, simply because I want to know where your night begins, and so that our kindred spirits can find each other amidst this vast ocean. Now, turn down the bright lights, turn on a fan, or adjust the room temperature to be just right. Let the background sound of ocean waves and the groaning of oak wood guide you. We are in the year 970 AD, an era where the omens of the gods often appeared in the breath of the frost. Are you ready? Take a deep breath. Feel the comfort spreading through your body, and join me as we begin the greatest exploration of a lifetime. Part 1. Birth in Iceland and Childhood Years. The smell of whale fat and juniper wood smoke creeps through the gaps in the turf roof, clinging to your breath in the dim shadows of the longhouse at Erikstar. You lie there, your childhood eyes following the last embers dancing on the stone floor, feeling the warmth of the thick bare skin covering your body. Outside, the winds of Breiðafjörður howl, battering against the walls of stone and earth, bringing the saltiness of the North Atlantic and the bone-chilling cold of eternal frost. This is Iceland in the 970s, an island at the edge of the world, where volcanic fire and glacial ice constantly struggle for life, and where you, Leif Erikson, begin to learn the weight of destiny. You feel in your blood the compression of generations of exile, a legacy not written on parchment, but carved deep into your marrow by axe blades and wave-breaking ships. The weight of the past begins with your grandfather, Thorvald Asvaldsson, the man who took his family away from the lush Jæren region of Norway, not out of a desire for discovery, but out of escape. You hear the echoes of whispers in the night about manslaughter, about bloody disputes in the old country, where the price to be paid was not just blood money or guild, but total rejection by the community. The sea does not remember, but men do. The irony of history begins here. Your family became the greatest explorers in the world, only because they had nowhere else to go. a bitter paradox where glory germinated from rejection. The thick snow outside seems to be trying to stifle the small farm, just as the laws and judgments stifled your grandfather's freedom in Norway. When Thorvald brought your father Eric the Red to Iceland, he chose a new land that had only been formed for a century, a refuge for those who no longer had a homeland, second sons with no inheritance, and defiant souls who refused to bow to royal power. You look at your small hands, wondering if they will hold a steady oar, or if they will again be stained with blood in the struggles for power like your ancestors. The contrast between the silence in the longhouse and the ferocity of the family bloodline creates an invisible pressure, a constant vibration in your mind as you sink into a stream of thought about your roots. Your father, Eric the Red, is a man forged from fire and fury. You can see him in your memory, with hair and beard as red as an omen of what is to come, standing tall among the Icelandic valleys. He married your mother, Theodhild, a woman who carried a strange calmness within her, perhaps inherited from the Irish blood of her ancestors. Eiríksstaðir, the farm where you were born, is a testament to your father's power of reclamation, but it is also a fragile oasis in a land of fire and ice. Here, between black volcanic cliffs and steaming geothermal streams, you learn to read the language of nature before learning to read the runes. Winter darkness swallows the long days, and in the absolute silence of the northern night, you realize that nature does not know the existence of man. The ice does not know the heart of man. By the age of 5, when children in the south might be playing in warm gardens, you had to learn to hold a heavy wooden sword and a round shield. The exercises were not for entertainment, but for survival. You feel the cold of the sword hilt touching your palm, a reminder that in this land, strength is the only language respected. By the age of 7, your feet were calloused from climbing volcanic crags to herd sheep, and your eyes had learned to distinguish dozens of shades of gray in the sky to predict an approaching blizzard. The art of seafaring seeped into you as naturally as breathing. You watched the seagulls soaring and understood they were leading the way to abundant fishing grounds. You watched the constellations sparkling like diamonds against the pitch-black sky and knew they were the eternal maps of God. But the one who truly opened your intellect was not your hot-tempered father, but Tyrker, your foster father originally from the distant German lands. Tyrker, a slave, but one who carried a treasure trove of knowledge within him, was with you in your quietest moments. You recall his deep, warm voice as he taught you how to read the mysterious runes carved on wood, how to distinguish types of herbs that could heal wounds, and even the foreign languages of the Celts or the Russians. Tyrker was the perfect contrast to Eric the Red. If your father taught you how to swing an axe to settle an argument, Tyrker taught you that a wise word and calmness often brought a more lasting victory. Wise and moderate in all things, it was his teaching that planted a seed of observation in your heart, helping you see what others overlooked, preparing you for a stature completely different from ordinary Viking warriors. As you entered your early teens, around the age of 12, the peaceful space at Eiríksstaðir began to be torn apart by the spirals of violence that your father could not avoid. It was a cruel repetition of family history, an omen of permanent exile waiting on the horizon. It all started with the smallest things. Your father's slaves accidentally caused a landslide onto a neighbor's farm. But in Iceland, where honor is more precious than life, a small scratch could lead to an ocean of blood. You witnessed the anger flare in your father's eyes when he heard the news that his servants had been killed in retaliation. There was no negotiation, no reconciliation. Eric the Red's axe had spoken, and the death of Eyjolf the Foul put an end to your family's settled life in the Haukadalur Valley. You stood there, watching the wooden planks being dismantled from your familiar home, feeling your mother's faint sadness at having to leave the place she had worked so hard to build. Your family moved to a small island, but the irony of fate did not seem to let go. Another dispute broke out, this time over the sacred carved pillars Setstokar that your father had lent to a man named Thorgest. Those planks were not just decorations. They carried the soul of the clan and faith in the gods. When Thorgest refused to return them, violence once again stained the white snow red. The death of Thorgest's sons led to the harshest sentence from the Althing Assembly at the cliffs of Thingvellir. Eric the Red was banished from Iceland for 3 years. At the age of 30, your father had been rejected by 2 nations, becoming an outlaw. During your father's 3-year absence, you had to shoulder the responsibilities of a man under Tyrker's guidance. This was the period when your maturity was forged through waiting and observation. You saw your mother, Tjodhild, handle everything with a silent resilience, and you understood that strength does not only lie in muscle. You spent more time on the cliffs, looking west, where the sun sets into a vast and mysterious sea. Rumors of the land of Gunnbjörn Ulfsson, who had once been blown off course to the west and seen strange islands, began to haunt your mind. You wondered if there was another world out there, a place where your family could truly find peace without being shackled by the judgments of men. The cold of Iceland seemed to soften as the stories of the western lands were warmed by the fireside. You learned to listen to the voice of the waves, realizing that every wave carries a message from unknown horizons. In those long, sleepless nights, you repeated Tyrker's lessons on ocean currents and the movement of drifting ice flows. You realized a chilling truth. Your father's mistakes and violence were opening a door to greatness. Without that sentence of exile, perhaps your family would have remained ordinary farmers in Iceland forever, forgotten in the flow of time. But fate chose a crueler way to record your names in history. History is woven from the gossamer threads of chance and desperate choices. In the year 985, when your father returned from his secret exploration, all of Iceland was shaken by his descriptions of a land he called Greenland. You saw the sharpness in your father's eyes as he described lush green meadows and fjords full of fish, though you knew that most of it was only frost. It was a grand but necessary deception, the most ingenious media campaign of the Middle Ages to lure desperate people looking for a new start. You felt an electric current run down your spine as you realized that your childhood had officially come to an end. The lessons with Tyrker, the days of herding sheep on the volcanoes, all of it was just preparation for the journey ahead. You were no longer a child listening to stories about heroes. You were preparing to become part of that saga. The final days in Iceland passed in a rush of preparation. You found yourself standing among sacks of wool, barrels of dried fish and meat, and restless livestock. The air was thick with the smell of tar used to seal the ships, and the sweat of men giving their all for a journey with no return. The contrast between the nostalgia for the old homeland and the hope for the new land was clear on the face of every settler. You looked up at the sky, where gray clouds were drifting fast to the west, as if nature itself was urging you to set out. The weight of your grandfather's death, the weight of your father's anger, and the weight of the secret dreams in your heart were converging, creating an irresistible push toward the vast ocean. That morning, a thick fog covered the harbor, turning the dragon ships into blurry ghosts on the water. You tightened your leather belt, feeling the weight of the dagger at your hip, a gift from Tyrker. You looked back at the Eiriksstaðir farm for the last time, where childhood memories were gradually fading into the mist, like footprints on the sand washed away by the waves. You understood that you were leaving behind an old, narrow world to enter a vast realm where there were no maps, where your name would be written with courage and perseverance. A strange sense of peace invaded your soul, not because of safety, but because you knew you were on the right path that fate had laid out, a path leading to the end of the world to find yourself. Your footsteps were heavy on the black pebbles of the shore, each crunch under your soles like a goodbye to the Icelandic land that had raised you. You headed toward the anchored dragon ship, where the red and white striped sail was flapping in the cold wind like a giant lung breathing the air of the new journey. As you placed your hand on the rough wooden side of the ship, the cold from the wood seeped into your skin, transmitting a vibration from the ocean beckoning in the distance. Part 2. Migrating with family to live in Greenland. The groaning of oak wood under the pressure of giant waves from the North Atlantic becomes your new heartbeat, a steady and ruthless rhythm. You stand on the deck of the Nar, your 15-year-old hands gripping the rough side of the ship, feeling the vibration of the ocean transmitted through every grain of wood. Around you, the fog is as thick as a white shroud, swallowing everything except the howling of the wind and the thudding of grim ice floes drifting south. This is the year 985, and you are part of a fleet of 25 ships, carrying the hopes and the desperation of 500 people leaving Iceland to find a promised land named Greenland. The weight of this migration on your shoulders is not just sacks of wool or livestock, but the weight of a new beginning built on the ashes of exile sentences. You look toward your father, Eric the Red, standing at the prow like a bronze statue carved in the storm, his fiery red beard in sharp contrast with the gray sky and white sea foam. This contrast is not just in color, but in the nature of the journey. Your father is chasing an illusion, a rumor from decades ago by the sailor Gunnbjörn Ulfsson, while those following him are gambling their lives on a paradoxical name. Greenland. The name sounds like a promise of eternal meadows, but you know that behind that curtain of mist lies a massive continental ice sheet waiting to stifle any living soul that dares approach. Nature does not know the lies of men. It only knows the power of elimination. The storm hits on the 10th day of the journey, turning the ocean into a raging monster. You witness the cold indifference of the sea as other ships in the fleet gradually disappear into the night and the heavy waves. One ship is struck broadside. The sound of splintering wood echoes like the breaking of human bones. Then everything sinks into the darkness without a single cry for help reaching your ears. The irony of fate is clear when only 14 ships survive to touch the western coast of Greenland. The remaining 11 ships and hundreds of lives are forever lost at the bottom, becoming part of a treasure that the sea never returns. The sea does not remember. The sea only keeps. The price of a new land is always paid in blood and breath, a bitter truth you had to learn to accept while still so young. As your ship moves deep into Eriksfjord, a magnificent landscape appears, creating a wonderful contrast with the deadliness of the open sea. Steep cliffs shelter quiet fjords, where water as clear as a mirror reflects the deep blue sky of the Arctic summer. There, amidst the dark black mountain ridges, are green valleys with soft grass, and streams full of salmon. You feel the warmth of the land touching your skin, a false sense of peace hiding the eternal cold lurking in the island's interior. The Brataleith farm is established on the most fertile strip of land, and it is here, in a longhouse built of stone and tough turf, that your youth begins to be forged between the two extremes of life and death. Inside the longhouse at Brataleith is a world completely different from the wildness outside. You lie on the high wooden platform, smelling the smoke from the hearth in the center of the house, blending with the smell of roasting walrus meat and the pungent sourness of fermented whey. The flickering firelight casts onto the thick walls, creating dancing ghosts that follow the rhythm of the skaldic poetry that the men chant during the long winter nights. There is a strange warmth in this narrow space, a powerful contrast to the massive ice sheet out there, which you liken to a frozen hand constantly squeezing the heart of Greenland. In this longhouse, time seems to stand still. Only the breath of the community keeps the fire of life from being extinguished by the northern darkness. Tyrker, your wise foster father, always sits beside you during those evenings. He is not a Viking warrior with a bloody axe, but a man of knowledge and contemplation. You feel the warmth from his wrinkled hand as he teaches you how to carve runes into pieces of walrus bone, passing on the German language, Celtic, and the secrets of botany. Tyrker teaches you that a man's greatest strength does not lie in the arm that swings a sword, but in the intellect that knows how to observe and understand. He tells you of distant lands where there are vines heavy with grapes and great stone cities, planting a seed of curiosity in your heart that reaches far beyond the fjords of Greenland. Tyrker's teaching is a gossamer yet durable spider's silk, connecting you to the vast world outside this absolute isolation. When spring arrives, you spend most of your time on the Nar ships, learning to befriend the ocean in an entirely new way. In Greenland, seafaring is a way of life. It is the only way to connect the tiny settlements separated by treacherous terrain. You learn to maneuver the sail through massive drifting icebergs, mindless entities that possess the power of ancient gods. You learn to read the surface of the sea as if reading a book. A slight change in the color of the water signals a dangerous reef. A sudden shift in wind direction is an omen of a blizzard approaching from the ice sheet. You begin to develop an intelligence of the body, where your senses react to nature faster than thought. You have no magnetic compass, but you have the sunstone, a magical crystal that helps you determine the position of the sun even on the foggiest days. You learn to observe the habits of seabirds, understanding that when gulls fly low and toward a certain direction, it is guidance toward land. This knowledge seeps into your blood and bone through arduous walrus hunting trips, where you face sea monsters with long tusks and terrible power. Every trip is a lesson in humility before nature, for you understand that at the end of the world, arrogance is the fastest death sentence. Nature does not remember glory, it only remembers those who adapt. During those years of training, a distinct contrast begins to form between you and your father. Eric the Red is a man of violence and instant judgments. He settles every dispute with an axe, a habit that has seen him banish time and again. But you, under the influence of Tyrker and the harsh experiences of survival, choose the path of negotiation and observation. You realize that violence only creates inescapable spirals of hatred, like the swift currents around Greenland's Cape Farewell. You grow into a tall and powerful man, with a handsome appearance inherited from Viking blood, but carrying a quiet and wise soul within. Wise and moderate in all things. This composure is not weakness, but the strength of a leader with foresight. One who knows that to lead others into the unknown sea, you need a heart colder than the ice outside. You see the irony in the existence of the Greenland community. They possess sharp iron weapons and great ocean-crossing ships, yet they are completely dependent on the meager resources of a frozen island. The fragility of life exists in every barrel of dried fish, every pelt stored for the winter. You begin to worry about the future of your kind on this land. Would Greenland truly be the final stop, or was it just a stepping stone for an even greater journey? Omens of a world further to the west, where vast forests stood instead of ice, began to appear in your dreams, fueled by the stories of sailors blown off course at sea. Every night, when the emerald aurora dances across the broadleaf sky like the silk ribbons of the gods, you stand alone by the shore of Eriksfjord. The sound of ice cracking in the distance echoes like thunder, a reminder that the continental ice sheet is still moving, still freezing the world in its own way. You feel the weight of expectation from the settlers, who look to you as a future leader who will bring the stability your father never could. But deep down, you feel an irresistible urge, a desire to break this isolation, to seek another truth, a land that Gunnbjorn caught a glimpse of but never touched. The time from 985 to 994 was a process of compressing the will. You were no longer the 12-year-old boy watching the farm in Iceland be dismantled. You were now a man of Greenland, carrying the hardness of volcanic rock and the flexibility of the sea waves. You had learned to master fear, turning it into a tool for navigating in the dark. This silent preparation was the dawn of a new era, where the name Leif Erikson would no longer be bound by the sins of his father, but would shine on its own as a guiding star for all humanity toward the western horizon. You knew your moment was approaching, a moment when the sea would no longer be a barrier, but a bridge to immortality. Under the dim light of the midnight sun, you walk slowly along the rudimentary pier at Broadaleith, listening to the water lapping gently against the side of your nar. You reach out to touch the glossy black tar on the hull, feeling the cold of the falling mist, blurring the distant ice-capped peaks. Part 3. Journey to Norway for knowledge. Your hand leaves the tar-covered side of the ship, the rough sensation of Greenland oak still lingering on your fingertips as you step onto the deck of the newly purchased Nair. These are no longer familiar walrus hunting trips around the fjords. This is a journey back to your roots, a 3,000-mile voyage across the open sea to seek recognition at the Norwegian court. You stand there, among the most elite sailors, feeling the weight of Eric the Red's blood flowing in your veins, but your mind is turned toward the teachings of Tyrker. You understand that a leader is not only made by the axe, but by the connections and reputation built in distant lands. The north wind begins to blow strongly, filling the red-striped sail, and you feel the vibration of the ship as it begins to cut through the waves, leaving the protection of Broadaleith Farm to venture into the uncertainty of the Atlantic. The ocean has no paths, and the sea does not remember. You stand at the stern, your eyes following the sun for orientation, your hands gripping the large steering oar as the ship pitches between massive swells. Without a compass or a map, you can only trust the sharpness of your senses and the omens from nature. You see the contrast between the gray sky and the white sea foam, feeling the bone-chilling cold of salt spray clinging to your hair and beard. The weight of the ocean begins to press upon your mind as the first storms hit, turning the intended route to Norway into a joke of destiny. Adverse winds howl like abandoned souls, constantly pushing your ship south, away from the Scandinavian motherland and into an unfamiliar sea where thick fog hides every guiding star. The irony of history begins to reveal itself when your ship, instead of reaching Norway, is blown ashore on the Hebrides Islands off the coast of Scotland. You step down onto the wet sand, feeling the utter exhaustion of your body after long days of fighting death. Here, amidst the mossy cliffs and the damp air of a land influenced by both Norse and Celtic cultures, you meet Thorgunna. You see in this noblewoman a wild and deep beauty, a complete contrast to the dry, cold environment of Greenland. The summer days spent trapped on the island due to unfavorable winds are rare moments when you allow yourself to step away from the worries of power to immerse yourself in a deep love. However, the stillness of the Hebrides is only a brief pause before the instinct for exploration and family responsibility rises again within you. When the northern winds begin to shift, signaling the right time to continue the journey, you face a cruel choice. Thorgunna, who is carrying your child, pleads to go with you, but you, with the moderation and wisdom of a future leader, refuse. You understand that taking a noble woman away, without her family's permission, would spark endless blood feuds. We are reluctant to abduct a woman of such high birth from a foreign country. Your words are as cold as Greenland ice, but contain the sobriety of one who looks far ahead. The contrast between the call of the heart and the weight of honor creates a silent crack in your soul as the ship weighs anchor. You still hear the echo of Thorgunna's prophecy from the shore, an omen about your son Thorgils, who would later become a haunting sorrow in your life. I will raise the boy and send him to you in Greenland as soon as he is of an age to travel with others. But it's my guess that he will serve you as well as you have served me now with your departure. The sea does not care about oaths or tears of separation. It simply continues to carry you eastward, where the Norwegian throne waits to mold you into a different man. You look toward the horizon, feeling the weight of solitude as you realize that every step toward greatness must be paid for with the sacrifice of personal feelings. Finally, the scent of pine forests and the warmth of the Norwegian mainland replace the saltiness of the sea as you dock at Nidaros. You enter the court of King Olaf Tryggvason with the demeanor of a chieftain, the confidence in your every step immediately catching the king's attention. You find yourself standing in great stone halls, where bright torchlight illuminates gilded shields, and sagas are chanted by royal skalds. King Olaf, a man of great stature and iron will, recognizes your value, the son of the legendary Eric the Red. The contrast between the wildlife in Greenland and the luxury and order at the Norwegian court opens a new world before you, where power is consolidated by both the blade and faith. In the months of serving the king, you are not just a warrior, but a silent observer. You sit opposite King Olaf over a game board, feeling the weight of political calculations in every move. You hear the king speak of the miracles of Jesus Christ, of how plagues retreated when men accepted baptism. Large and strong, of fine appearance, wise and moderate in all things, the king said of you. You realize a great paradox. While your father, Eric the Red, still clings to the ancient gods in his solitude in Greenland, the entire northern world is transforming under the light of a new religion. The weight of change begins to affect the beliefs that were forged since your childhood. Your decision to accept the rite of baptism is not merely a spiritual act, but a strategic step of destiny. You feel the holy water flowing on your forehead, a cool sensation that brings a strange liberation from the ghosts of your family's past. The contrast between militant gods like Thor or Odin and the image of the compassionate savior creates a revolution in your mind. You are no longer just a Viking seeking land. You are now a man carrying a mission of civilization. However, the omen of a rift with your conservative father back home always lingers, like a dark cloud hiding behind sacred prayer services. King Olaf saw in you a perfect tool to extend the influence of Christianity to the ends of the world. You shall go as my envoy and convert Greenland to Christianity. This responsibility weighs more heavily on your shoulders than any cargo on the ship. You understand that you are taking a new kind of weapon home, something that could destroy your father's belief structure, but is the key to Greenland not being left behind by the flow of history. The irony lies in the fact that you, the son who once admired the strength of Eric the Red, now become the one who will challenge his spiritual power. The days preparing to leave Norway pass in deep reflection. You look at the priest and clerics the king sent with you, feeling a sharp contrast between their black robes and the iron armor of the crew. You prepare to take them across the fiercest seas in the world, to a land where frost is still the supreme god. You feel the weight of the mission, knowing that this return will not have celebratory victory feasts, but a silent and persistent confrontation between the old and the new. History is waiting for you in the West, not just as new lands, but as a total transformation of a community. Under the dim light of the Norwegian autumn sun, you stand on the harbor, watching other ships prepare for winter. The sound of hammers striking oak and iron chains clashing creates a music of displacement. You realize that this trip has turned you into a man of the world, one who knows how to combine the physical strength of the Norse with the political wisdom of mainland Europe. The weight of knowledge makes you calmer, but also lonelier in your thoughts about the future. You are no longer afraid of storms, for you know that destiny has chosen you to be a bridge between two worlds, two eras, and two faiths. The contrast between the young man who left Greenland a few years ago and the royal envoy standing here today is clear in your sharp and composed eyes. You have learned to control not only the ship, but also the hearts of men. You know that upon your return, your mother, Theodhild, will be the most valuable ally in this mission, an omen of the rise of female power in shaping religion in the new land. Every night, looking west, you see the image of Greenland appearing no longer as a land of exile, but as a part of the kingdom of God, where the light of Christianity will dispel the shadows of old hatreds. As the final barrels of food are brought on board and the priest has settled into his place, you step onto the deck with an entirely new mindset. You feel the breath of the ocean beckoning, a familiar breath, but now carrying silent prayers. Your hand takes the tiller, feeling the power of guidance, not just guiding the ship past drifting icebergs, but guiding an entire people into a new era. The stillness of the sea before weighing anchor is a precious space for you to look back at all you have experienced in Norway, the glories, the lessons, and the silent sacrifices. The ship begins to leave the dock, the giant oars striking the water to create expanding ripples. Much like the influence of what you are about to do, you stand at the prow, eyes fixed on the vast ocean where the sun is setting in a golden red glow. The east wind blows strongly, carrying the warmth of Norway to see you off on a journey of return full of storms and glory. Part 4. Planning and preparation for the expedition. The flickering firelight in the longhouse at Bradaleith reflects in your eyes as you sit quietly amidst the murmurs of the Greenlandic men. The winter of 999 is covering the island in a white shroud, and the cold seems to be trying to pierce through the thick stone walls to touch your soul. You hear the echoes of the accounts from Bjarni Herjolfsson, the merchant who had been blown off course to the west 13 years prior. In Bjarni's memory, that land appeared not with frost and volcanic rock, but with rolling hills and dense forests covering the horizon. You feel a bitter contrast. While Bjarni saw salvation and turned his back on it, you see there the destiny of an entire people. The sea does not remember the cautious, it only remembers the bold. The irony of history is clear in the community's attitude toward Bjarni. They reproach him for lacking the spirit of exploration, but that very lack plants a fierce desire in your heart. You look at the pile of wood burning out in the hearth, realizing that your Greenland is slowly dying for lack of timber. The massive ice sheet out there is like a frozen hand, constantly squeezing the life out of the settlement, stripping you of the most basic materials for shipbuilding and construction. The weight of scarcity weighs on every breath of the Greenlanders, forcing them to wait for rotted logs drifting from the distant ocean. You know you cannot wait for the sea's charity. You must go find the source of life where Bjarni once refused to go. You decide to seek out Bjarni, not to reproach him, but to conduct a strategic transaction. You buy the very Nar he once used, a ship that already knows the way to that mysterious land. You touch the dry tar on the ship's side, feeling the vibration of the old oak grains. This ship carries within it the memory of western storms, and you believe it will lead you back there. This is a deliberate preparation, a plan calculated based on intellect and observation, rather than a chance trip. You do not want to be blown off course. You want to master those storms. The Nar appears under the pale spring sun, a testament to the peak of Norse seafaring engineering. You stand watching the carpenters meticulously check every iron rivet and the overlapping wooden planks, according to the clinker technique. The ship does not fight the ocean. It curves with every wave like the spine of a giant whale. You smell the pungent scent of animal fat impregnated into the wool sail, a priceless asset woven from thousands of hours of labor by the women of Greenland. That sail will be your lungs, breathing the breath of the wind god to take you into the unknown. The stillness of the ship while anchored at the harbor creates a powerful contrast with the stormy power it is about to confront. To operate this great machine, you need men who know no fear. You have recruited 35 companions, warriors, and sailors forged through the bone-chilling cold of the polar region. You look at the faces weathered by frost and wind, seeing in their eyes the thirst for fertile meadows and endless forests. The weight of expectation from 35 families rests on your shoulders, but you feel steady seeing Tyrker, your German foster father, standing beside you. Tyrker brings not only spiritual support, but also knowledge of a temperate world the Norse have never known. He is the gossamer thread connecting you to the lands of wild grapes and wheat, things that previously only existed in distant sagas. When everything is ready, you perform a final act of filial piety, inviting your father, Eric the Red, to lead the trip. You stand before the old chieftain, feeling the weight of time on his silver hair. You convince him that his luck is the most necessary thing to open the new land. After several refusals, Erik agrees, and you feel a strange reassurance thinking that father and son will conquer the horizon together. But destiny always has its own ways of asserting its power. Nature does not know human plans. It only knows its own omens. On the day of departure, as Erik is riding his horse down to the pier, his horse suddenly stumbles. You witness your father being thrown to the ground, and in that moment, a deathly silence covers everything. Erik's injured leg is not just an accident. It is a clear foreshadowing that his generation has ended its mission. You hear your father's trembling but firm voice. "It is not designed for me to discover more lands than the one in which we are now living. Nor can we now continue longer together." The irony lies in the fact that this very accident stripped your father of his final chance for glory, while simultaneously placing the full weight of history onto your shoulders. You watch your father's lonely figure return to the Bradaleith farm, feeling a great solitude beginning to invade your soul. The contrast between the father's retreat and the son's advancement creates a painful pause in the family saga. You step onto the ship, no longer standing in the shadow of Erik the Red, but as the sole leader of 35 souls waiting for the order to weigh anchor. The weight of power is now palpable, like the weight of the barrels of dried fish, meat, and whey being packed tightly under the deck. You know that from this moment, every decision, right or wrong, will be paid for with the lives of those who trust you. The final hours before leaving the dock are a strange stillness. You walk the length of the ship, rechecking the bearskin sleeping bags and the thick wool clothing. You see the priest, sent by King Olaf, standing quietly at the prow, holding a cross, creating a strange contrast with the battle axes and round shields of the sailors. Christianity and faith in Norse omens exist side by side on this ship, like two ocean currents flowing in opposite directions but leading to the same destination. History is woven from the gossamer threads of faith and audacity. The south wind begins to blow strongly, vibrating the giant wool sail. You order the anchor to be weighed, feeling the iron chains clashing against the ship's side like a farewell to the land of Greenland. The ship begins to glide, leaving the protection of Eiriksfjörð, heading toward the gray ocean where no map has ever left a mark. You stand at the tiller, eyes fixed on the horizon where fog is waiting to swallow everything. You no longer feel afraid, because you know that the cold of the frost cannot cool the fire of desire in your heart. The ice does not know the heart of man, but man knows how to conquer the ice. The Nair curves over the first waves of the open sea, taking you away from the snowy peaks of your homeland. You feel the salt of the ocean clinging to your lips, the bitterness of separation blending with the sweetness of the upcoming adventure. Every stroke of the oarsman is a heartbeat of a new era being born. You look back at the Greenland coast one last time, where the tiny longhouses gradually fade into the misty haze, like childhood memories receding to make way for greater epics. You walk slowly toward the prow, your hand resting on the rough walrus hide ropes. Beneath your feet, the floorboards begin to vibrate with every wave, and you silently breathe into your lungs the freezing but free air of the North Atlantic. Part 5. Crossing the Ocean and Discovering Vinland. The water parts before the prow of the Nar with a steady murmur, a lone sound breaking the vast silence of the ocean. You stand at the tiller, your hands long accustomed to the roughness of rope and tar, now gripping the wooden steering oar. feeling the vibration of the ship as it glides through waters never marked on any map of the southern people. This is the year 1000, a milestone that time will remember. But right now, surrounded by mist and heavy waves, you only feel the weight of uncertainty pressing against your chest. The sea does not know the ambitions of man. The sea does not remember those who have passed through it. It only moves sullenly, carrying the chill from giant icebergs lurking somewhere in the gray fog. The sea does not remember. The sea only endures. You recall the face of Bjarni Herjolfsson in the flickering firelight back in Greenland, the man who saw paradise but chose to turn away. The irony of history is clear in every pulse of the waves. Bjarni had safety but was reproached by men, while you have danger but carry the hope of an entire people hungering for warmth and timber. The weight of resource scarcity at Brada Halith, where every scrap of wood is more precious than gold, is the force driving you down the path others refused. You look west, where the blurry horizon waits to swallow the 35 souls on board, and realize that courage is sometimes just the result of having no way back. The days at sea are a repetition of the rhythm of wind and wave, a monotonous song of nature that easily lulls the human mind into a dreamlike state. You repeat the structure of the sagas in your head. The ice does not know the heart. The sea does not remember the name. The weight of ocean solitude begins to seep into your skin as you use the sunstone to navigate through the thick, cloudy days. You look into the transparent crystal, trying to catch a faint ray of light from the heavens to know you are not drifting away from destiny. Every mile crossed is a severing of the thread to the old world, moving closer to a reality that no European had dared to dream of before. The first landing point appears not as the lush meadows of rumor, but as a land so barren it makes the heart wither. You step onto flat, cold rocks, feeling the bone-chilling cold of a stony plateau without a single blade of grass. In the distance, giant ice mountains loom like sleeping gods, radiating a gloomy and deathly atmosphere. You stand in that gray space and declare, "It has not come to pass with us in regard to this land as with Bjarni, that we have not gone upon it. To this country I will now give a name and call it Helluland, the land of flat rocks." The contrast between the expectation of paradise and the reality of this slate land creates a sense of disappointment, a reminder that nature always has a way of testing the traveler's patience. But you do not stop there, for the blood of the explorer does not allow you to give up before soulless rocks. The ship weighs anchor again, cutting through waves to the south, chasing warmer winds beginning to blow from the horizon. After many days, the scent of pine resin and the moisture of old-growth forests begin to creep into your senses, replacing the saltiness of the sea. A level land appears, with dense forests stretching to the water's edge, where there are white sand beaches as smooth as a young maiden's skin. You breathe the life-filled air of this place deeply and name it Markland Land of Forests. This land shall have a name after its nature, and we will call it Markland, Land of Forests. This is the answer to the freezing winters of Greenland, the treasure of wood that your father and the settlers have long craved, a tangible salvation woven from green leaves. The irony lies in the fact that even though Markland was enough for practical needs, an invisible force still urged you to go further. Destiny did not stop at pine forests. It beckoned you to a land of wonders beyond imagination. With a northeast wind filling the sail, you sailed for 2 more days until a small island appeared north of the mainland. When you stepped onto the dew-drenched grass in the early morning, you touched the glistening droplets and brought them to your tongue. A pure, gentle sweetness, more delicate than anything you had ever tasted in the north, spread through your body. The dew does not know its sweetness, but the man knows his grace. When the tide went out, your Nair ran aground on the shallows. But the eagerness to explore meant you and your 35 companions could not wait a moment longer. You plunged into the cool water, rushing ashore to where a clear river flowed out from a large lake. The contrast between the biting cold of Greenland and the temperate warmth of this land makes you feel as if you are walking into a dream. Here, salmon of unbelievable size dance in the water, and the meadows seem never to wither. You order the building of temporary huts, naming the camp Leif's Boudir, feeling the warmth of the motherland cradling souls weary from the long voyage. The weight of leadership does not allow you or the others to be lazy in this abundance. You divide the expedition into 2 groups. Half stay to guard the large house taking shape. The other half goes deep inland to discover the secrets of nature. You require them not to separate and to return before darkness falls, for you know that the irony of strange lands often hides within their gentle beauty. History is woven from careful steps and keen observation, not from impulsive actions. You yourself, sometimes leading the forest party, sometimes staying to ensure the warming fire never goes out, show the moderation and wisdom of a true leader. And then, the most significant event occurred, tied to your foster father, Tyrker. When Tyrker was found missing, a worry weighed on your heart, for he was not just a slave, but the soul of your childhood memories. But when you found him, you saw a completely different Tyrker, a man in a state of strange excitement, muttering in German before returning to Old Norse. His discovery of wild vines, heavy with grapes, was the final piece to complete the picture of paradise. Wine, the drink of the gods, and southern nobility now existed right here in this wilderness. You name the land Vinland Land of Wine, a name that will echo through centuries as a symbol of abundance and luck. Throughout the winter in Vinland, nature seemed to bless you with a strange favor. The grass remained green, the livestock needed no stored fodder, and the long, warm days made you forget that you were thousands of miles from home. The contrast between the harshness of Greenland and the richness of Vinland made you realize the world was much larger than humans had ever known. You spent time felling giant maple trees and harvesting wild grapes, filling the ship's hold with the treasures of the New World. You understood that you were not just bringing back materials, but a living proof of the greatness of the Norse spirit. The greatest irony of this journey is that it would be forgotten by most of the world for the next 500 years, until archaeologists at Landsok Meadows found your ship rivets and iron forges under layers of green turf. History waits for time to confirm the truth. Your journey in the year 1000 connected 2 branches of humanity, dissolving the boundaries of the Ice Age and opening the first global encounter. You are not just an explorer. You were the one who united the world with courage and a simple Nair. On the way back to Greenland in the spring of 1001, the ocean seemed to smile upon you when you rescued a crew of shipwrecked Icelanders on a reef. This act of mercy, combined with the discovery of Vinland, earned you the title Leif the Lucky. You stand at the prow, watching the forests of Vinland fade away. feeling the weight of glory resting on your shoulders. You are no longer the sun standing in the shadow of Eric the Red. You are now a living legend, one who brought paradise back to the frost. The sea may not remember, but those whose lives you saved and the generations to come will always speak your name with deep respect. The contrast between the silence of the ocean now and the cheers waiting in Greenland is clear in your mind. You know your life will change forever from here, and so will Greenland. You have brought the light of a new world to warm the cold longhouses of your homeland. Every wind that blows through your hair now carries the aftertaste of wine and the scent of sweet dew, memories that will follow you into your deepest dreams. You step near the cargo hold, your hand touching the large maple logs neatly stacked, feeling their rough surface still holding a bit of the warmth of Vinland's earth and sky. Beneath your feet, dried grapes and barrels emit a rich aroma, promising brilliant victory feasts under the firelight of Bradaleith Farm. Part 6. Spending the winter in Vinland and returning. The pure sweetness of the early morning dew on your tongue remains like a promise of a new era as you walk upon the soft grass of this third land. You feel the warmth of the sun seeping through your thick wool tunic, a sensation that is strange yet immensely pleasant, completely different from the pale and dry sunlight of Greenland. Beneath your feet, the earth is no longer the cold slate of Helluland or the white sands of Markland, but a soft richness where life seems to be surging through every blade of grass and every branch. You look out at the quiet strait where your Nair lies leaning on the shallows as the tide recedes, and you feel a fierce urge to immerse yourself in the clear river flowing out from the large lake ahead. Nature here does not appear threatening. It welcomes you like a mother receiving a child returned from afar. And in that moment, you know you have found a stopping place for the long winter ahead. When the tide rises high, bringing the power of the ocean to lift the stature of the ship, you order it move deep into the lake, where the water is as still as a mirror, reflecting the deep blue sky. The sound of the iron anchor clashing against the water echoes like an assertion of possession, and immediately, you and your 35 companions set to work establishing a base. You feel the weight of the hammocks as you carry them ashore, the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves blending into your breath. Temporary huts are quickly erected, but in the mind of a leader with vision, you know this place deserves something more permanent. You stand in the middle of the camp, your sharp eyes observing the terrain, and order the construction of a large house, a symbol of sustainable settlement that later generations will call Leif's Budir. The winter in Vinland begins to appear as a marvelous paradox compared to everything you have ever known about the northern world. You stand by the riverbank, seeing thousands of giant salmon splashing in the water, their size larger than any fish you have ever seen in the fjords of Iceland or Norway. The contrast between the constant food scarcity back home and the luxury of abundance here creates a sense of absolute reassurance. You feel the warmth of the air as winter approaches without bringing bone-shredding blizzards. The grass here maintains a persistent green hue, and livestock, if they were here, would never need cramped hay reserves. The weight of survival that has long rested on your shoulders now seems to be lifted, replaced by a leisure you were never before allowed to enjoy. The irony of astronomy in this land also gives you pause during quiet afternoons. You realize that on the shortest day of winter, the sun is still present from the time you begin breakfast until you prepare dinner. A balance between light and darkness that the people of Greenland could only dream of during the months swallowed by night. You watch your shadow stretch long on the ground at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and understand that you are in a place very far to the south, a latitude of life and warmth. The houses at Leif's Boudir, with their thick turf walls and sturdy wooden roofs, are not places to hide from death, but places to enjoy the richness of life. History is woven from these sturdy houses, where the warmth of the fire is no longer the only luxury against the frost. As a leader, you understand that idleness in a paradise can be a poison for the discipline of the Norsemen. You summon the 35 crew members under the flickering firelight of the longhouse, your voice calm but firm as you deliver the strategy for exploration. I propose now to divide our company into 2 groups and to set about an exploration of the country. One half of our party shall remain at home at the house, while the other half shall investigate the land. And they must not go beyond a point from which they can return home the same evening, and are not to separate from each other. This is not just an order, but a commitment to protect one another in an anonymous continent. You do not want the freedom of Vinland to turn into chaos. The weight of responsibility is shared by you in the fairest way. You do not allow yourself to stand outside those rules. You alternate roles, sometimes carrying an axe into the deep forest with the exploration group, sometimes standing guard before the porch of the longhouse, eyes watching the boundary between forest and sea. People look to you, a man who is large and strong, of fine appearance, wise and moderate in all things. Your fairness in sharing work and food has created an invisible but stronger bond than walrus hide ropes. It is the trust in the leader that helps these 35 souls feel at peace in a world without maps, where every footstep could touch upon wonders or unknown dangers. However, destiny always knows how to create moments of tension to test your patience. It was the day that Tyrker, your German foster father, did not return with the exploration group. You feel a cold emptiness spreading in your chest as darkness begins to fall over Leif's Boudir, and Tyrker is still missing. To you, Tyrker was not a thrall, but the one who opened the doors of knowledge, the one who taught you to see the world through the eyes of meticulous observation. The contrast between the peace of the land and the fear of losing your closest kin creates a violent struggle. You prepared to order a large-scale search the following morning, ready to face the worst. The sea does not remember, but the human heart never forgets those who nurtured it. The irony of fate is clear when Tyrker reappears in a state of extraordinary excitement. You see him step out from the shadows of the birch trees, his eyes bright and his lips muttering the foreign sounds of the German tongue. In that moment, your worry turns into utter amazement. As Tyrker gradually calms down and switches to Old Norse, the news he brings completely changes the value of this trip. He has found grapes, wild vines heavy with fruit, a product that Norsemen only heard about in stories of distant southern kingdoms. You look at Tyrker's hands, stained with the purple of wild grapes, and understand that Vinland is not just a place of timber and fish, it is the land of wine, of joy, and the privileges of the nobility. Tyrker's discovery acts as a foreshadowing of a wealth far beyond your initial pragmatic calculations. Wine, the drink that brings vibrance to feasts at the Norwegian court, now exists at the edge of the world. You decide to name the land Vinland, a name that will be etched into the minds of the Norse as a true paradise. You see the excitement in the eyes of the sailors as they hear about self-sown wheat fields and giant maple trees with sweet sap. The contrast between the barrenness of Greenland and the abundance of Vinland has now reached its peak. You feel the weight of glory beginning to form. a glory built not on battlefields, but on discovery and the gifts of nature. The winter passes in a strange peace, and when the warm rays of the spring sun of 1001 begin to warm the turf walls of Leifspedir, you know it is time to bring these treasures back to your homeland. You direct the crew to utilize every last moment to extract resources. The sound of axes striking maple and hazel trees echoes throughout the forests, creating a music of diligent labor. You watch the large trunks being hauled to the shore, neatly stacked into the hold of the Nar, and know that every grain of this wood will be a priceless fortune in Greenland. The grapes are carefully harvested, filling the small boat towed behind, carrying the flavor of this warm land across the ocean. The return journey is a confrontation with the paradox of the sea. You stand at the prow, looking east, where Greenland awaits with its ice and permanent harshness. The weight of the ship, full of timber and grapes, makes it glide more slowly, but more steadily, on the North Atlantic waves. You feel a strange confidence, a luck covering the entire crew, as not a single person was lost during a year away from home. The irony lies in the fact that just when you are carrying the most wealth, the sea puts you to a test of compassion. An omen of your luck is about to be verified through a fateful encounter on the vast ocean. When the ice peaks of Greenland begin to loom on the horizon, your sharp eyes spot something that does not belong to the sea. On a lonely reef, amidst heavy waves, a group of people is clinging to the wreckage of a sunken ship. There are 15 Icelandic sailors standing on the brink of death. You feel a tug-of-war in your mind. Should you divert the ship so heavily laden with cargo to perform a risky rescue? But the nature of a fair and merciful leader does not allow you to turn away. You order the ship diverted, using all your skillful seafaring techniques to approach the reef and bring every person on board safely. This act not only saves their lives, but also redeems the soul of this expedition, turning your glory into a deeply human one. The fact that you brought 15 strangers back to Brattahlid Farm, sharing your food and shelter with them throughout the winter of that year, caused your reputation to spread further than any treasure of wood. You feel the warmth from the sincere gratitude of those who were rescued. And it is from here that the nickname Leif the Lucky is officially bestowed upon you. The contrast between a tough Viking warrior and a man of great compassion has created an immortal image. You realize that luck is not something that falls from the sky, but the result of living true to your honor and responsibility. Luck does not know the selfish, it only walks with the generous. When the Nair finally anchors safely at Eriksfjord, a stillness covers all things. You step down onto the dock, your feet touching the familiar Greenland soil again, feeling the familiar cold of your homeland, but your heart is burning with the fire of Vinland. You see your father, Eric the Red, waiting in the distance, and you understand that from this moment, the order of the world in the eyes of the Greenlanders has changed forever. You have brought paradise back to the frost, brought truth to the legends. The weight of returning is soft, like the breath of the ocean after a long storm, bringing you into a state of absolute peace. You walk slowly toward the farm, your hand lightly grazing the maple planks just unloaded from the ship. The scent of sap and the saltiness of the sea blend together, creating an eternal memory in your mind. Every step you take now carries the weight of a living legend, a man who has seen the horizon and touched the unthinkable. Part 7. Inheriting Leadership and Governing the Colony. The cold of the winter of 1002 was unlike any other you had experienced. It brought not only snow and ice from the continental ice sheet, but also the breath of decay and a fateful transition. You stand silently in the longhouse at Bradaleith, your hands now calloused by the tiller and rope gripping the silver ring, the symbol of a chieftain's power. Before you, the fire of Eric the Red has gone out. The Great Father, the one who discovered this massive island, now rests in the arms of the Greenlandic earth after a devastating plague. You feel a vast void spreading in your chest, like a fjord recently blocked by ice. An era of axes and fury has closed, giving way to the weight of inheritance resting upon your shoulders. The irony of history is clear. In the moment you officially take over the position of Gothi, the supreme chieftain of the entire settlement, you look out the small window, where the eastern settlement stretches with solitary farms amidst the white snow, and realize that the glory of the Vinland trip is now but a distant memory, replaced by the grim realities of ruling. You are no longer a free explorer pointing the ship's prow toward the setting sun. You are now the one carrying the lives of thousands of people clinging to stone axes and faith to survive at the edge of the world. The weight of laws, the weight of judgments, and the weight of every scrap of food in the storehouses begin to permeate your every breath. In the local assemblies at the Thing Cliffs, you find yourself at the center, where your father once used the power of shouts and the axe blade to impose his will. But you, with the moderation forged by Tyrker and years of observing the Norwegian court, choose the path of negotiation. You listen to disputes over pastures and persistent family feuds with a strange composure. Large and strong, of fine appearance, wise and moderate in all things. That is how everyone perceives you. You realize a great paradox. To keep Greenland from collapsing, you must be colder than the frost, yet more compassionate than the spring streams. Violence can settle a moment of anger, but only justice builds a nation. The survival economy of the colony is a grim math problem that you must solve daily. Greenland has no bustling markets or golden wheat fields. It only has walrus ivory, polar bear furs, and ropes made of animal hide. You stand in the warehouse at Bradaleith, smelling the pungent scent of fur and the saltiness of walrus ivory, understanding that each of these items is the key to trading for iron, grain, and timber from Europe. The contrast between the raw treasures of Greenland and the refined essentials of the civilized world creates a fragile trade network of which you are the keeper. You must receive Norwegian merchants with the shrewdness of a diplomat, ensuring this lifeblood of trade never stops flowing, for if it stops, Greenland will sink into permanent darkness. But the greatest challenge does not lie in trade figures. It lies in the spiritual revolution happening right within your own family. You brought the Christian faith back from Norway like a new fire, but it met the cold resistance of the old gods. You see the deep rift between your mother, Theodhild, and your late father. Your mother, under your persuasion, became a devout believer, and the small Theodhild's church rose right at Bradaleith as an omen of irreversible change. The irony lies in the fact that the religion bringing salvation to the soul created a separation in your parents' bedroom. After her conversion, Theodhild refused to sleep with Eric, much to his displeasure. You stand between two worlds, two faiths, feeling the weight of change tearing through ancient values. As chieftain, you must make the most painful decision of your life, to give up personal voyages to Vinland. You look west, where the sun sets into the vast ocean, and feel a fierce urge to return to Leif's Budir, where there are wild grapes, and fields of wild wheat. But responsibility toward Greenland has stifled that desire. You understand that a leader cannot abandon his people to chase his own dreams. Vinland to you is now like a forbidden lover, only to be met again in dreams. You accept stepping back, becoming the supporter, the licensor for others, including your brothers, to use the ship and the camps you worked so hard to build. The contrast between Leif the Explorer and Leif the Ruler creates a profound, somber note in your saga. In the long winter nights, when the aurora dances in the sky over Eriksfjord like morning spirits, you often sit alone by the fire, thinking about your legacy. The arrival of Thorgils, your illegitimate son from the distant Hebrides, is a reminder of the mistakes and passions of youth. You accept the boy, recognizing your blood, but you see in Thorgil's strange eyes a displacement, an omen that your power will not be able to pass to this son. The irony of fate is that you can conquer an entire ocean, but cannot conquer the community's affection for your own child. History is woven from the gossamer threads of lineage and acceptance. However, the title Leif the Lucky still shines like the North Star. People respect you not only for the land you found, but for the peace you bring. Under your leadership, the Eastern settlement is no longer a place of exile, but has become a symbol of Norse resilience. You have turned cold rocks into a common home, warmed by faith and order. The moderation in how you settle family feuds has prevented unnecessary bloodshed, keeping the community united against the threat of harsh nature. You realize that true luck does not lie in finding wild grapes, but in keeping the fire of life from ever going out on this frozen island. The years 1002, 1003 passed in the silence of power. You spent more time observing the ship's docking, not to prepare for departure, but to ensure they carried enough iron and wheat for the coming winter. You find yourself frequently standing with your mother at the small church, listening to Latin prayers blending with the wind whistling through the stone gaps. A strange intersection between the warm south and the cold north is happening right here, under your coordination. You are no longer afraid of the darkness, for you know you have brought light to Greenland, a light that comes not just from the sun, but from wisdom and faith. The contrast between the ambitious young man in Norway a few years ago and the somber chieftain standing here today is a testament to the maturity of a great soul. You have learned to love Greenland with a love of responsibility, a love that does not need long journeys to prove strength. Every time you look up at the white ice-capped peaks, you no longer see them as enemies, but as silent protectors for a community of which you are the soul. The weight of presence is your true power, a power based on absolute trust and respect from your fellow countrymen. You step out of the longhouse, your breath turning into white smoke in the freezing air. Your feet are steady on the ground of Brattahlid, every step carrying the composure of one who has understood the laws of destiny. You point your gaze toward the shipyard, where your brother Thorvald is busy preparing for a new voyage under your guidance. Part 8. Supporting the Brothers' Expedition. The responsibility of leading Greenland has turned you from a wanderer into a silent firekeeper. You find yourself spending hours in the longhouse, listening to the crackling of dry wood in the hearth and reflecting on your father's passing. Eric the Red built this colony with fury and an iron will, but now it is your composure and wisdom that keep this community bound together. You understand that you are no longer allowed to risk your life on the fierce waves of the Atlantic just to satisfy personal curiosity. The weight of presence at Brattahlid is greater than any expedition. You are the anchor for thousands of people struggling against the cold of the continental ice sheet. But even though your feet are bound by the Greenlandic soil, your mind is always turned west, where the houses of Leif Erikson still quietly await the footsteps of the Norse. The irony of fate lies in the fact that you became the patron of dreams you could not fulfill yourself. When your younger brother, Thorvald Eriksson, sought you out with eyes burning with the desire for discovery, you saw yourself from a few years ago. Thorvald was a perfect contrast to your stillness. He was restless, decisive, and always carried the breath of storms in his every word. You did not hold him back. On the contrary, you gave him all the best you had. The ocean-going ship that once belonged to Bjarni, the sea charts etched in memory, and the right to use the sturdy camp in Vinland. The weight of support makes you feel as if you are sending a part of your soul into the unknown sea. History is woven from the quiet support of those who stay behind, where the older brother stands at the pier so the younger can reach the great sea. In the spring of 1004, you stand at the harbor watching Thorvald and 30 elite men weigh anchor to leave Eriksfjord. The sound of iron chains clashing against the ship's side rings out like an omen of the events to come. You warned him very carefully about the ocean currents and wind directions, but deep down, you still feel a vague unease. The contrast between the hopeful beginning and the cold stillness of the ocean makes you realize that luck is never something that can be fully passed on to others. You watch the sail grow small and then vanish into the western mist, feeling the weight of waiting begin to press against your chest. The Greenland ice sheet out there seems to sigh, a low thudding sound reminding you that nature always has its own calculations that man can never fully see. Months later, through the accounts of the survivors, you relived Thorvald's journey in every dream. You saw them land at Leif Erikson, saw them survive the first winter thanks to the abundant salmon you had once described. But the tragedy began in the second summer, when Thorvald led his men deep into a beautiful fjord he secretly wished to build a home in. The irony lies in the fact that the gentle beauty of nature made them let their guard down. On that beach, the first encounter with the indigenous people whom you called Skrallings took place. You feel a sharp pain in your heart, hearing about your brother's senseless brutality, killing 8 natives, sleeping peacefully under skin boats. It was a bloody foreshadowing, a mistake that permanently established the pattern of hatred for centuries to come. A rain of arrows from the natives poured down on Thorvald's ship, like a judgment from the motherland of Vinland. You saw Thorvald standing there, shield in hand, protecting his subordinates, but a fateful arrow found the gap between the ship's gunwale and the shield. The weight of death is present in his every epic last word. "I have got a wound under my arm. An arrow flew between the edge of the ship and the shield and struck under my arm." And the cold conclusion, "Here is the arrow, and this will lead to my death." The irony reaches its peak when Thorvald, in his last breath, still praises the land that killed him. "This is a rich country we have found. There is plenty of fat around my entrails." It was the mad and great pride of a Norse warrior, a painful contrast between glory and disappearance. The bad news of Thorvald's death flew back to Greenland like a sudden blizzard, but it did not cool the fire of the Erikson clan. Your third brother, Thorstein, stepped up to shoulder the responsibility. You see in Thorstein's eyes not a thirst for gold, but the weight of brotherly love and Christian faith. He wanted to bring his brother's body back for burial in holy ground. You continued to support him, continued to give the ship and hope, but the sea once again showed its absolute indifference. The journey of Thorstein and his wife Gudrid was a series of continuous stormy days on the North Atlantic. You stand at Brattahlid, hearing the waves crash against the cliffs, and knowing that your brother's ship is being battered in the chaos of nature. The contrast between the humane purpose of the trip and the cruelty of the weather makes you realize that sometimes kindness is not an amulet against the wrath of the sea gods. Thorstein returned not with his brother's body, but with an exhausted body, and then passed away in a winter plague. You stand by your brother's sickbed, feeling the weight of cumulative loss. 3 men of the Erikson family, Erik, Thorvald, Thorstein. Now only you stand firm amidst the storms of life. But it is in the ashes of tragedy that a new light appears through Gudrid, the young widow carrying the resilience of volcanic rock. When the merchant Thorfinn Karlsefni came to Greenland and fell in love with Gudrid, you saw a new opportunity for Vinland. The irony is that even though you lost your brothers, you found new, capable allies to continue the great voyage. Karlsefni asked you to relinquish the houses in Vinland, and this is when you showed the authority of a supreme chieftain. You lent them, but never allowed them permanent ownership. I lend the houses, but I do not give them away. Your judgment was as sharp and cold as frost, but contained the wisdom of one who preserves a legacy. You stand on the pier watching the massive expedition of 160 people, including women and livestock, depart. It was the largest-scale colonization effort, a powerful contrast to Thorvald's small exploratory trip before. You feel the weight of hope thinking about the child Snorri, soon to be born the first European born in the New World. But you also know that the land has tasted Norse blood, and it will not bow easily. The greatest and most painful irony came from your own sister, Freydis. You heard news of her expedition with a silent skepticism. Freydis carried her father's hot temper but lacked your moderation. When rumors of the massacre at Leifsbudir flew back, your heart tightened. You find yourself standing in the interrogation room, looking into the sailors' eyes and hearing them tell how Freydis had personally taken an axe to kill 5 Icelandic women. The contrast between a Leif the Lucky, who always saves people, and a Freydis the Cruel, who always kills, created a scar that will never heal in the family honor. You feel the weight of betrayal spreading through every fiber as you realize your sister turned the paradise of Vinland into a bloody slaughterhouse. Your reaction to Freydis's crime is a testament to the struggle between justice and blood ties. You are the supreme chieftain, the one holding the scales of justice for all Greenland, but you are also a brother. In the moment of facing Freydis, you uttered the painful judgment. I do not have it in me to deal with my sister Freydis as she deserves. Instead of the death penalty, you issued a curse of forgetting. But I predict that her descendants will never prosper. It was a painful tolerance, an escape from the violence you always loathed. The contrast between your absolute power and helplessness before family affection creates the deepest somber note in your life as a ruler. The period of 1004-1008 passed like a piece of music full of tragic variations. You find yourself often sitting alone on the high seat in the Brattahlid longhouse, eyes looking into the darkness in the corner of the room. Vinland, the land of wine and sweet dew, now in your mind is stained with the red of Thorvald's blood and Freydis's brutality. You realize a historical paradox. Norse iron technology and great ocean-crossing ships ultimately had to retreat before indigenous people using Stone Age weapons, simply because of the vast difference in population and irreconcilable hostility. The weight of failure in settlement does not diminish your stature, but portrays a raw truth about human limits before destiny. Nature does not remember colonization. It only remembers the souls lost to the green woods. Your mark in this era is the mark of a gatekeeper. You did not go, but without you, no one could. You are the keeper of the key to Leif's Boudir, the keeper of the sea route connecting two continents. Your stillness in Greenland is the anchor that keeps the expeditions from being completely washed away into nothingness. You see, your legacy lies not in the lands conquered, but in the stories told by the fireside, the gossamer threads of history carrying the full weight of the past. You accept your position as a great observer, a leader who has seen both the glory and the tragedy of his kind in strange lands. The contrast between the excitement of the voyages and the stillness of the governing life is clear in every passing day. You have learned to find peace in running the colony, in listening to the hammers of the carpenters and your mother's prayers in the church. Your luck now is no longer measured by clusters of grapes, but by the stability of Greenland amidst countless difficulties. The weight of the title Leif the Lucky seems to have become more ethereal as you understand that the greatest luck is to live and protect what you love. The darkness of the Greenland winter is falling, but in your heart, the light of Vinland memories still burns like an eternal lighthouse. You step out of the main house, your feet walking slowly on the thin, newly fallen snow. The blurry moonlight illuminates the path leading down toward the shipyard, where workers are packing up their tools after a day of diligent work. You stop for a moment, taking a deep breath of the cold northern night air, then point your gaze toward the dark, murmuring ocean out there. Part 9. Continued support for Karlsefni's settlement. The rhythmic tapping of the wooden hammer against the stone table at the Brattaleith assembly echoes, as steady as the heartbeat of an old land trying to keep pace for all of Greenland. You stand there, your hands no longer gripping the battle axe, but gliding lightly over the sheepskins, recording the laws, feeling the weight of the silver chieftain's ring on your thumb. This is the year 1009, and your world has shrunk into the fjords of the eastern settlement, where every decision about allocating a bundle of driftwood or a strip of pasture carries the weight of survival. You are no longer the free explorer chasing new horizons, but the paramount chief, the one carrying the destiny of thousands of souls amidst the frost. The contrast between the vastness of the ocean you once conquered and the narrowness of administrative responsibilities creates a somber note in your soul. The sea does not remember. The sea only waits for the next saga. The weight of power begins to seep into your skin through every court session, every negotiation for walrus ivory with southern merchants. You look out from the porch of the Brattaleith Manor, seeing the Nars docking, carrying the cold from the sea, and you understand that you cannot leave this position. Greenland needs a cool head and a moderate heart to coordinate the vital trade network with Europe. However, the Vinland fire in your heart has never fully gone out. It is only waiting to be passed on to the deserving. The irony of fate lies in the fact that just when you are wealthiest and most powerful, you are the least free. You have become the anchor, keeping the ship of Greenland from being washed away into nothingness, while others prepare to set sail for the paradise you found. The appearance of Thorfinn Karlsefni at Brattahlid brings a new wind from Iceland, strong and full of ambition. You see in Karlsefni the makings of a man, a composure and excellent seafaring skill that reminds you of yourself years ago. Beside him is Gudrid, an extraordinary woman with eyes containing both intelligence and courage. They come to you not to ask for gold or silver, but to ask for a legacy, the right to use Leif's Buthier. You stand in the center of the great hall, the flickering firelight reflecting on your pensive face, and make the decision of a wise leader. You lend them the houses, but never relinquish ownership. I lend the houses, but I do not give them away. This decision is a foreshadowing of your absolute authority. You are the patron, the keeper of the keys to the new world, the one standing in the shadows to control the chess pieces of history. Karlsefni's expedition of 160 souls, along with livestock and women, weighs anchor and leaves Greenland, creating a brilliant contrast with the small exploratory trips of the past. You stand on the highest crag of Eriksfjord, eyes watching the sail gradually vanish into the western mist, feeling the weight of hope pressing against your chest. This is no longer a mere excursion. This is an effort to take root, an ambition to turn Vinland into a second homeland. You silently pray to the God you have accepted, hoping that the sweet dew of that land will protect them, but deep down, you still hear the murmurs of the old gods' warning of nature's hostility. History is woven from the gossamer threads of courage and audacity, where a small mistake can lead to a cataclysmic disaster. News of the birth of Snorri Thorfinnsson in Vinland flies back to Greenland like a joyful song in the middle of a freezing winter. You smile, hearing of the first child of European blood crying out at birth on the North American continent. This event is the pinnacle of settlement ambition, a testament that the Norse came not only to take resources, but to give life. You feel a quiet pride. It was your support and your houses at Leif's Buthier that created the cradle for that first spark of life. The contrast between the fading of Eric the Red and the beginning of Snorri creates an eternal loop of existence. However, nature does not know human joy. It only knows the grim balance of the land. The irony of history begins to reveal itself through the first trades with the indigenous people, those you called Skrallings. You hear stories of how Karlsefni wisely used cow's milk and red cloth to exchange for precious pelts and furs. A model of peaceful trade seemed to be forming, where marten and mink skins became a bridge between two strange worlds. The weight of curiosity drew the two people closer, but it was the lack of a common language and deep-seated prejudices that turned that proximity into a silent fuse. You realize that peace in Vinland is as fragile as a thin layer of ice on a spring lake. One wrong step and everything will collapse. And then, the foreshadowing of collapse came from a creature no one expected. A Norse bull. You can imagine the terrifying scene when that giant animal escaped its pen, letting out a roar that shook the entire forest. To the indigenous people who had never seen such a beast, that roar was not the sound of survival, but the growl of a monster from hell. The contrast between the peaceful pastoral intent of the Norse and the spiritual terror of the natives turned a small incident into a total war. Nature does not remember good intentions. It only remembers the fears unleashed. The battle at Vinland appears in your mind through terrifying accounts of dark blue objects flying overhead and the frightening sound of stone missiles thrown from slings. The sturdy Viking shield wall, the thing that once subdued all of Europe, now disintegrated before the panic and the overwhelming numbers of the natives. But in the moment of men's cowardice, The ruthlessness and courage of your sister, Freydis Eriksdotter, exploded. You feel the shock hearing how Freydis, though pregnant, bared her breast and struck it with a sword to drive away the enemy. Why are you running from these wretches? I thought you would have knocked them on the head like cattle. If I had weapons, I think I would fight better than any of you. The contrast between physical weakness and Freydis' frantic mental strength saved the settlement, but it was also an omen of the darkness, gradually covering your clan. Karlsefni's decision to abandon Vinland after 3 years of holding out was a bitter admission of human limits. You stand in the great hall of Brada Leith, listening to Karlsefni explain that no matter how wonderful the land, it could not compensate for the constant fear. The weight of isolation amidst thousands of miles of ocean made them realize that the Norse were only tiny grains of sand in the ocean of indigenous peoples. The irony lies in the fact that iron weapons and great ships had to bow before stone arrows and skin boats simply because of the difference in population. They realized that even though the land was excellent, they could never live there in safety or freedom from fear because of the native peoples. The return expedition to Greenland did not bring a new colony, but it brought holds full of maple wood and high-value furs. You watch those products being unloaded at the Brada Leith Pier and know that your power has just been strengthened by another level. The wealth obtained from Vinland helps Greenland continue to survive through the harshest winters, maintaining its position as an irreplaceable paramount chief. But in your heart, a faint sadness begins to kindle as you realize that Vinland is gradually becoming a legend, a rejected paradise. History exists through the gossamer threads of the sagas, and your name will forever be linked to an era of exploration that touched the ultimate limits of humanity. The period of 1009-1013 closes with the false stability of Greenland. You spend more time watching the boy Snorri grow up, the child carrying the soul of the Western land. You see in Snorri a contrast between the glorious past and the uncertain future of the Norse in North America. Your luck, Leif the Lucky, is now no longer measured by new lands, but by the ability to keep what is already there from vanishing into the frost. You realize that ruling is also an exploration into the human heart, where storms come not from the ocean, but from the conflicts and fears of the community. You step out of the Bradhaleith Manor, your breath turning into white smoke in the cold twilight air. The final light of the sun shines on the icebergs out in the bay, turning them into crystal blocks sparkling like the unfinished dreams of Vinland. You point your gaze west, where the horizon is now only a gray strip, feeling the heartbeat of Greenland blending into your own. Beneath your feet, the thin snow crunches as you walk slowly toward your mother's church, the evening bell ringing out like a farewell to the journeys that never return. You reach out to touch the rough stone wall, feeling the cold of time gradually seeping into your skin, preparing for the final days of a legend, stepping slowly into the shadows. Part 10. Handling Family Crimes and Passing Away. The north wind whistles through the gaps of the turf roof at Bradhaleith, carrying the bone-chilling cold of the winter of 1014. You sit silently on the high seat of the chieftain, your thin but still steady hands gliding lightly over the smooth oak table. The weight of the silver ring on your thumb, the symbol of authority and responsibility, now seems heavier than ever. You feel a vague unease spreading in the air, a foreshadowing of the darkness returning from the west. The contrast between the stillness of the Greenland settlement and the bloody rumors that just arrived with the ship of your sister Freydis Eriksdotter creates an invisible pressure stifling your chest. The sea does not hide crimes. It only waits to wash them ashore. You remember the image of Freys when she first returned, standing defiantly on the deck of the large ship seized from two Icelandic brothers. In her eyes, there was not the composure of an explorer, but only the violent fire and bottomless ambition of your father, Eric the Red, yet lacking the diplomatic moderation you had worked so hard to cultivate. The irony of blood is clear as you realize that while you tried to build Greenland with peace and faith, your own sister was staining Vinland red with betrayal. The weight of family honor rests on your shoulders as whispers of the winter night massacre at Leifsbúðir begin to leak through the door cracks of the longhouses. You know you cannot step back from this darkness, even if it wears the face of your own kin. Under the flickering light of torches in the dark room, you confront the three sailors who were brought in. You look into their trembling eyes, sensing the ultimate terror before the power of truth. You order them to speak, and each confession rings out as axe blows to your heart. They tell of the horrific night when Thorvard, Freydis' weak husband, led the men to kill the sleeping Icelanders. But what shakes your soul most is the image of Freydis, your sister, coldly taking an axe to slaughter 5 innocent women when her men faltered. The contrast between the gentleness of the Vinland paradise and the barbarity of this crime creates a painful historical paradox. You realize that nature is not cruel. The human heart is the true frost. The weight of justice now forces you to deliver a verdict. You stand before Freydis, feeling the violent struggle between your role as paramount chief, Gothi, and blood ties. This is the greatest test of your ruling life, a test for which no sea chart can guide the way. You find yourself in an ultimate moral deadlock. You cannot personally take your sister's life, but you cannot let this crime pass in silence. In the enveloping silence of the Broadaleith Great Hall, you utter the tormented judgment. I do not have it in me to deal with my sister Freydis as she deserves, but I predict that her descendants will never prosper. That curse was not just for Freydis. It was like a full stop to your family's Vinland dream. You realize a grim irony. Violence brought your father to Greenland, and now violence is slamming shut the door to the promised land in the west. The contrast between a prosperous future and a bloody present makes you feel utterly exhausted. You let Freyds live in the silent rejection of the community, a spiritual punishment heavier than death. History is woven from the gossamer threads of conscience and powerlessness, where the hero must learn to live with the unhealable scars of the lineage. The following years, from 1016 to 1020, your life passed in the stillness of daily governing tasks. You no longer looked west with longing. Your eyes were now focused on the tiny farms of the eastern settlement. You spent time presiding over the assemblies, distributing walrus meat and ivory to the community, and ensuring every longhouse had enough warmth for the winter. The weight of survival became the main rhythm of your life. You saw yourself aging along with the drifting icebergs, the once fiery red hair, now white as the snow on the peaks of Eriksfjord. You accepted the solitude of power, understanding that every leader is an island in the ocean of responsibility. The rise of Christianity in Greenland was the only consolation in the twilight of your life. You stand in the small church of your mother Thodhild, sensing the scent of wax candles and the murmur of prayers blending with the wind. The contrast between the old war gods of your father and the peaceful faith of Christ created a gentle shift in the community's heart. You fulfilled the mission King Olaf entrusted to you, turning Greenland into an outpost of faith at the end of the world. You look at the Maplewood cross brought back from Vinland and smile, realizing your greatest legacy is not land, but the spiritual light you lit amidst the northern darkness. As the year 1018 turned, you felt the strength in your body gradually vanishing like early morning mist. The great voyages were now only sagas sounding in your dreams. You saw yourself gliding on sea waves, touching the sweet dew of Vinland, and hearing the song of the maple forest. The irony of time is that it takes away physical strength, but grants you the wisdom of one who has understood all laws of destiny. You did not fear death, for you knew your life had been a bridge connecting unknown worlds. History does not record your exact date of death, for a legend never dies. It simply fades into the wind and waves. On a windless night in 1020, you lay on the high platform in the Leif Manor, your blurry eyes looking at the final flickering flame. You feel the warmth of your son Thorkel's hand gripping yours, ready to receive the silver ring and the weight of inheritance. The transition of power took place silently and peacefully, like the way autumn gives way to winter. You took a deep breath, carrying the scent of the Greenland Sea for the last time, and closed your eyes. In that moment, you saw your Nar setting sail toward the endless horizon, where there is no more frost, no more crime, only the eternal freedom of a Leif the Lucky. Your footprints on North American soil may have been covered by green grass, but the truth about Vinland remains deep underground at Lansauk Meadows, waiting 10 centuries to be awakened. The contrast between the forgetting of medieval history and the recognition of modern science creates a late but enduring glory. You were not just the first European to touch the New World. You were the one who proved that human courage can overcome all limits of the map. The weight of legacy now belongs to all humanity, as every October 9th, your name is mentioned as a symbol of the tireless spirit of commitment. The room now sinks into total darkness, leaving only Thorkel's steady breathing beside the bed. You are gone, but the warmth from the Leifsbúðir houses you built still lingers somewhere in the blood of the settlers. The stillness of the northern night envelops Bradaleith, erasing the pains and disputes, leaving only the absolute peace of a life lived fully with destiny. You release yourself into the void, feeling your body as light as gossamer threads flying through space. The sound of Eriksfjord waves cradles your ears like a final lullaby, taking you across the ocean of time to the harbor of immortality. Your footsteps leave the ground, gliding lightly on the newly fallen snowflakes toward the blurry light of the aurora dancing in the sky. You no longer look back at Greenland or Vinland, for your journey has now merged into one with the eternal stars. Conclusion. Leif Erikson, Whispers of Waves and Frost. No need for noise, no need to try to prove anything anymore. The blurry light by your window is now only a fragile outline, a final boundary between the world of reality and the eternal realm of dreams. The chieftain Leif Erikson, whom you have accompanied throughout history, from a child growing up in the shadows of exile to a son of the great ocean, has now receded, like a thin smoke vanishing into the mist of Eriksfjord. The dragon ships, the maple forests of Vinland, and the heavy clusters of wild grapes, all are gradually receding into nothingness, giving way to the absolute stillness of your soul. The only thing remaining now is a gentle, warm sensation in your left chest, a deep notion that no matter how harsh life is like Greenland's frost, or how rich like Vinland's sweet dew, Composure and kindness are always the most precious guiding stars. You do not need to be a king to be great. You only need to live a moderate life and listen to the call of destiny. The legacy of Leif Erikson lies not only in new lands, but in how we face the darkness and find the light within our own hearts. The bell from a distant temple, or perhaps the murmuring waves from an ancient memory, is ringing softly like a maple leaf falling onto a still lake. You feel your breath slowing down, steady and deep. All the worries of the long day have vanished, leaving only the peace enveloping your body like the warm bearskin in the Brattahlid longhouses of years ago. The final flame of the story has faded, giving way to the gentle darkness leading the way. Take a deep breath once more, relax every muscle, close your eyes completely, and let the whispers of waves and frost quietly take you to the best sleep. Wish you beautiful dreams of distant horizons.